The summons. The holographic message flickered to life in Marcus Kane's cramped quarters aboard the mining station, casting blue light across his scarred hands. By order of Queen Meridian of Celestia Prime, the projection announced, you are hereby summoned to participate in the Cosmic Arena Tournament. Marcus stared at the floating seal of the Imperial Crown, his heart pounding. 3 years he'd spent in these forsaken asteroid fields, piloting defense ships and protecting settlers from raiders, never imagining the Empire even knew his name. You're actually going? His friend Diego asked from the doorway, skepticism written across his weathered face. The prize could rebuild our entire colony, Marcus replied, though something else stirred within him, something beyond duty. The frontier had been his home since childhood, but he'd always wondered what lay beyond, in the glittering core systems where queens and princesses lived in floating palaces. The journey to Celestia Prime took 6 days through hyperspace lanes. Marcus spent the time reviewing combat recordings, studying the Empire's champion fighters with their advanced neural weapons and gravity manipulation tech. His own skills came from necessity, years of 3-dimensional combat in zero-gravity environments where one mistake meant death in the cold vacuum. When his transport finally breached the atmospheric shield of Celestia Prime, Marcus pressed against the viewport like a child. The capital floated among crystalline towers that caught starlight and transformed it into cascading rainbows. The palace itself defied physics, a massive structure suspended by invisible force fields, its gardens hanging in mid-air like emerald clouds. Contestant Kane, a protocol droid greeted him at the landing platform. Please follow me to your assigned quarters. The corridors were wider than entire ships Marcus had commanded, walls decorated with living murals that shifted and flowed like liquid art. His room overlooked the tournament arena, a colossal sphere of energy matrices where champions would fight for glory and fortune. But Marcus found his gaze drawn upward, to the highest balcony, where a figure stood watching the preparations below. Even from this distance, he could see her skin held an unusual purple luminescence, and her hair moved as though stirred by winds that didn't exist. That's Princess Zara, another contestant mentioned, a veteran fighter named Jackson who'd competed twice before. Daughter of Queen Meridian, most beautiful woman in the known systems, and completely untouchable. He laughed bitterly. They say she's being married off to Warlord Cross to secure a treaty. Poor thing has about as much freedom as a caged starbird. Marcus watched the princess turn away from the balcony, her movements graceful, but somehow weighted with invisible chains. Something in that gesture resonated with him. A fellow prisoner of circumstance seeking purpose beyond survival. That evening, all contestants gathered in the grand hall for the opening ceremony. Marcus stood among warriors from dozens of worlds, each one a champion of the respective systems. The queen entered first, her presence commanding absolute silence, followed by her daughter. Princess Zara wore a gown that seemed woven from twilight itself, deep purples fading to midnight blue.
Trials of combat. The first trial began at dawn, when 3 of Celestia Prime's suns painted the arena in shades of gold and amber. Marcus stood on a platform of solid light, feeling it hum beneath his boots as gravity generators whirred to life around him. The arena could simulate any environment, any condition, testing not just strength, but adaptability. Contestant Kane versus Champion Brock of the Iron Systems. The announcer's voice echoed through neural implants, making Marcus's jaw clench. Brock materialized on the opposite platform, a mountain of augmented muscle with cybernetic enhancements that gleamed like polished steel. The platform beneath them shifted suddenly, splitting into a dozen floating fragments. Marcus launched himself across the gap just as Brock's plasma cannon fired, the heat singing his jacket. Frontier instincts took over, his body moving through the 3-dimensional space like he was back in the asteroid fields, each jump calculated, each rotation precise. "Interesting technique," a voice whispered through his private channel, startling him mid-leap. He recognized it instantly from the ceremony, that melodic tone that seemed to carry hidden depths. Most fighters here rely on technology. You rely on skill. "Princess?" he grunted, barely dodging another plasma blast. "Focus on your match, pilot," Zara said, but he detected amusement in her voice. "We'll speak afterward. I insist." The distraction nearly cost him, as Brock closed the distance, massive fists swinging. But Marcus dropped below the strike, using his opponent's momentum against him, and delivered a precise blow to the neural coupling at Brock's spine. The giant warrior collapsed, his cybernetics temporarily disabled. The crowd erupted, but Marcus looked up at the royal platform where Princess Zara stood, her violet skin seeming to glow brighter as their eyes met across the distance. She inclined her head slightly, a gesture that sent his pulse racing. 2 more victories followed in quick succession. Each opponent brought different challenges, forcing Marcus to adapt and innovate. Between matches, he noticed Zara watching him specifically, her attention unwavering even when other spectacular battles unfolded. As the twin moons rose that evening, a palace guard appeared at Marcus's quarters with a simple message. "The princess requests your presence in the celestial garden. Come alone." Marcus followed the guard through corridors that grew progressively quieter and more secluded. The celestial garden hung suspended in its own pocket of atmosphere. Thousands of exotic plants from across the galaxy growing in impossible arrangements. Bioluminescent flowers cast soft purple light across winding paths. Zara stood beside a fountain of liquid starlight, her back to him, her posture rigid despite the garden's serenity. "You fight like someone who has everything to lose," she said without turning. "My colony depends on the prize money," Marcus replied, moving closer but maintaining respectful distance. "Medical supplies, defense systems, hope." "Hope," she repeated, finally facing him. Up close, her beauty was even more striking, but it was the sadness in her eyes that captured him. "I remember when I believed in that." She gestured to a bench carved from a single piece of moon crystal. "Sit, please. I tire of everyone treating me like I'm made of glass." Marcus sat, acutely aware of how her gown's fabric caught the light, how her presence seemed to make the air itself feel charged. "They say you are to be married," he ventured. "They say correctly." Zara's voice hardened. "Warlord Cross controls 3 systems and commands a fleet that could crush us, so I am the price of peace." She looked at him directly, vulnerability breaking through her royal composure. "Tell me, Marcus Kane, what is it like to choose your own path?" "Lonely, but mine," he answered honestly. Something shifted between them in that moment, an understanding that transcended their different worlds.
Forbidden connection. The tournament continued through the following days, but Marcus found his thoughts increasingly divided between combat and the purple-skinned princess who had somehow slipped past his defenses. Each victory brought him closer to the finals, and closer to whatever fate awaited the champion. Their second meeting happened by accident, or so it seemed. Marcus had taken to walking the palace's observation deck late at night when sleep eluded him. He found Zara there, staring out at the stars with her arms wrapped around herself despite the warm, recycled air. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked without turning. "Too much adrenaline from today's match." Marcus moved to stand beside her, careful to maintain proper distance even as every instinct urged him closer. "I fought a telepath who could predict my moves before I made them." "Yet you won," Zara smiled slightly. "I watched. You started thinking in multiple potential actions simultaneously, confusing his predictions." She finally looked at him. "You're smarter than you pretend to be, pilot. And you're more trapped than anyone realizes, princess." The words hung between them, too honest, too raw. Zara's expression flickered through surprise, pain, and something that looked dangerously like hope. "Walk with me," she said quietly. There's a place where even the surveillance drones don't go. She led him through a hidden passage behind a decorative panel, down stairs that spiraled into the palace's lower gardens. Here, ancient trees from old Earth grew in soil transported across galaxies, their leaves whispering secrets in the artificial breeze. Moonlight filtered through the canopy, painting Zara's purple skin in shades of silver and shadow. "I come here when the weight of duty becomes unbearable," she confessed, settling onto a moss-covered bench beneath a weeping willow. "When I need to remember I'm more than just a political asset." Marcus sat beside her, close enough now that he could smell the exotic perfume she wore, something floral and mysterious. "Tell me about him? About Cross?" Zara's hands clenched in her lap. "He's cruel, efficient, and believes wives are possessions to be displayed. I've seen recordings of how he treats those under his power. I have 3 months before the wedding, 3 months before I become another trophy in his collection." Without thinking, Marcus covered her hand with his own. The touch sent electricity through his entire body, her skin warm and surprisingly soft. "There has to be another way," he said fiercely. "There isn't," but she didn't pull her hand away. Instead, she turned her palm up, fingers intertwining with his. "Unless someone defeats his champion in the tournament finals, someone who could challenge his military might. But that's impossible. Cross has been grooming his fighter for years." They sat in silence, hands clasped, both aware they were crossing dangerous lines. Finally, Zara spoke again, her voice trembling. "Why does it feel like I've known you longer than days?" "Maybe because we recognize each other," Marcus replied, daring to brush his thumb across her knuckles. "Two people trying to save everyone else while drowning ourselves." Zara turned to face him fully, her eyes searching his face as though memorizing every detail. "If circumstances were different—" "They're not," Marcus said, but he leaned closer anyway, drawn by a force stronger than gravity. "No," she agreed, her breath catching as the distance between them narrowed. "No, they're not." Their first kiss was tentative, a question neither should ask. But then Zara's free hand came up to cup his face, and Marcus pulled her closer, and suddenly nothing else existed except this moment, this impossible connection between a frontier pilot and a princess.
The final battle. The championship final arrived like an executioner's march. Marcus stood in the arena's center, every muscle coiled with tension as his opponent materialized across the platform. Draven, Warlord Cross's champion, stood 7 feet tall with armor that pulsed with dark energy. "That's the man who wants my Zara," Cross's voice boomed from the royal platform where he sat beside Queen Meridian, his scarred face twisted in a satisfied smirk. "After my champion destroys you, pilot, I'll finally claim my prize." Marcus caught Zara's eye from her position beside her mother. Her expression was carefully neutral, but he saw the fear and hope warring within her violet gaze. They hadn't spoken since their last stolen night together, when she'd fallen asleep in his arms beneath the ancient trees, both pretending dawn would never come. The battle began with devastating force. Draven moved with impossible speed, his enhanced reflexes making him seem to teleport between attacks. Marcus felt ribs crack under a brutal strike, tasted blood as another blow connected with his jaw. The arena platforms shifted constantly, gravity fluctuating wildly. "Stay down," Draven growled, standing over Marcus's fallen form. "You cannot win. You're just a frontier rat playing at glory." Marcus thought of his colony, of the children who needed medicine, of Diego and the others counting on him. But more than that, he thought of Zara's laughter in the darkness, her whispered confessions, the way she'd looked at him like he was her only hope for something real in a life of obligation. He rose, ignoring his body's protests. "I'm not fighting for glory," Marcus spat blood and launched himself forward with everything he had left. I'm fighting for her. The crowd gasped as Marcus unleashed techniques he'd held in reserve. Frontier combat forms developed in the lawless asteroid fields, where survival meant his body moving through three-dimensional space with fluid precision. Draven's armor began to crack under the relentless assault. Marcus could feel his own body breaking, but he pushed harder, faster, until finally, with one last desperate strike to his opponent's neurocore, the champion fell. Silence gripped the arena for a heartbeat before erupting into chaos. Marcus collapsed to his knees, vision blurring, but he heard Zara's cry of joy and relief cutting through the noise. He'd won, but the true battle was just beginning. Warlord Cross stood, rage darkening his features. "This changes nothing," he snarled. "The treaty stands. The princess is mine." "Actually," Queen Meridian's voice cut through the tumult, cold and commanding. "By ancient law, the tournament champion is bound to my daughter as her sworn protector. Such bonds supersede all others." Marcus felt hands lifting him, heard Zara's voice close to his ear. "You fool! You beautiful, reckless fool!" Bound by choice. The binding ceremony took place 3 days later, giving Marcus time to heal in the palace's medical wing. Zara visited him constantly, sitting beside his bed and holding his hand while he recovered, no longer caring who saw or what they whispered. "You should have let him win," she said during one visit, tears streaming down her purple cheeks. "You nearly died." "Nearly doesn't count," Marcus managed a weak smile. "Besides, I had something worth fighting for." The ceremony itself was ancient and beautiful. Marcus stood before Queen Meridian and the entire court, his body still aching but his spirit soaring as Zara approached in a gown of pure white that made her skin glow like amethyst. "The bond of protector is eternal, but it is also a choice, Princess Zara. You may release this champion if you wish, send him home with wealth and honor." Every eye turned to Zara. Marcus's heart hammered as she looked at him, really looked at him, seeing past the champion to the man beneath. "I will not bind him against his will." Zara's voice rang clear and strong. "Marcus Kane, I offer you freedom or partnership, not as my servant, but as my equal. Choose freely." Warlord Cross made a sound of outrage, but Queen Meridian silenced him with a gesture. Marcus stepped forward, taking Zara's hands in his. "I choose you," he said simply. "Not the princess, not the prize. Just you, Zara." She smiled, radiant and free for the first time since he'd met her. "Then I choose you too." Their kiss sealed the bond, and the crystal flared with brilliant light, marking them as partners bound not by duty, but by love freely given. The crowd erupted in celebration, and even Queen Meridian smiled, pleased by this unexpected turn. Later, as they stood on the balcony watching the sun set over Celestia Prime, Marcus pulled Zara close. "What happens now?" "Now," she said, leaning into him, "we write our own story, together. I'll help rebuild your colony. You'll help me change the Empire. We'll make both our worlds better." "Sounds perfect." Marcus kissed her temple, breathing in her scent, memorizing this moment. Below them, the palace celebrated the champion who'd won more than a tournament. He'd won freedom, love, and a future neither of them had dared to imagine. The frontier pilot and the purple princess, bound by choice, facing tomorrow as equals. And somewhere in the night, the stars themselves seemed to shine a little brighter. The end.